With that, I'm going to turn to item number 11, which is really on the far on the agenda, and go to Ben Barlage in regards to the President's Park.
All right.
Give us your little
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to move over there because I got a computer set up that's projecting on the screen. Okay, so today what I have is basically be able to talk a little bit about the existing house that's on the 6 additional acres that are added to President's Park. And what's on the screen right now is the existing floor plate. So this is kind of a little bit of a talk about the culmination of where we're at. Obviously we had a design charrette several months ago where we talked about the entire park, but we also had a portion of that charrette where we talked about the house very specifically and how it could be reinterpreted to be used by the greater community as a kind of a small community center use, something that's 100 people or less, certainly on the inside. And then how does that relate to the park in general? So what I'm going to start with is the existing plan so that you get an idea for what sort of revisions would require some demolition. And then we're going to move on to my new plan, which is I've modeled in a kind of an AutoCAD software so that we can look at it in 3 dimensions and see if there are things that we like or don't like. It's a model that'll be a working model. This is our first presentation, so I can revise those as we go. But it gives you a good feel for the building in general. So if we kind of zoom in here, to give you your bearings, and hopefully you can all see my cursor, and I don't know if we should turn some lights down or not, but.
Sandy, you want to?
We can see something
moving
there, Ben.
You can see something moving.
Might be
Excellent.
something on the screen.
There you go. All right, so this is the main entry. So one of the first comments is, the main entry is very important to this house. It's part of the main facade. You see it from the park. It needs to remain access. It needs to be one of the main entries. But I also believe that there will be a secondary entry in the rear. So that's the first comment. So you see a single man door there, and it's going right into a space. So with this turning into more of a public use, it would be nice to have a vestibule out front here to kind of temper the atmosphere before you get inside. So that's kind of my first comment. Then I'm going to grab my pen here real quick, and you see it's broken into several rooms on the right. So our initial concept is to kind of remove this wall here to open up this front space, and then kind of do the same here so that you wind up opening this whole side of the floor plate. So that pretty soon you have almost in the round so that you can circulate, which is always a good layout when you have a group of people, even if it's at a residential scale. So then the next topic for thought of demolition is the access to the basement. And really, this house has a spectacular garage on the side. There are ways to access the basement that don't need to take up the main square footage. So the next thought is, well, let's remove the stair, and we can fill in that penetration right there. So once again, we gain more square footage. This is all about making more room. And then right here, there's a very small knee wall. If I can zoom in here, it's kind of a half-height wall. It's not structural in nature. So then that could help opening these 2 spaces to each other. So that's kind of the start of it. And then as we pan to what I would call the rear of the house, there's another bedroom here that's kind of an appendage. It is actually an addition to the original house that was built in 1950. The original house was kind of a simple rectangle that has been added onto over the years. So this room is kind of a Lone Ranger in some sorts. It's a piece of program that is kind of next on our thought process. So that is currently going to remain as is. And then that leads you to the rear of the house, where there's a lovely addition here that was put in about 2003. And there's a back patio that is radial in plan, that has great views of the forest in the back. But it's a very residential scale. So the thought is, and you'll see this as I zoom into the new drawings, is how can you kind of replicate that feel but at a larger scale? So one might consider, replicating a radial plan in the rear. So with that being said, now we'll have a little more fun here. We'll switch to the 3D version. So after several meetings and a lot of visits to the site, I've started to draw this up. And once again, just because it's on the screen doesn't mean it's final by any means, but it certainly helps give you a sense of scale and context. So we'll kind of run the same direction. So I'll start kind of here near the front. So what I've done here is enlarged, basically have given us a front porch. So that there's a vestibule, so that there would actually be some glazing here that would temper the weather. And there are also double doors, and they also swing out. So there's several things that have to happen for it to become a more of a commercial in nature. So then as you get into the house, you still have that front room that's pretty open. And then, remember there's this center portion, and there's a fireplace right here that's kind of the anchor of the house. So the idea here is that one could come in and circulate all the way around a central node that is essentially a kitchen that works as, certain venues it could be a serving station, another it could just be as simple as having a bartender or someone serving drinks, or if someone's having a card party out front, you just don't use it at all. So that's the kind of idea for the central node. Now, one of the biggest things that we had to really think about is the restroom facilities. And the addition that was put on this side of the house is currently restrooms, and they're quite large. So for our needs, we would need at least two fixtures for each men and women. So that's this is currently just very generous and quickly laid out. I mean, there would be more refinement to this, but that comes with two tricks. One is you don't want direct view of the restrooms, so you try to screen that in some fashion. So that's why this wall is currently shown here. So you kind of tuck in this way for the men and this way for the women. So that kind of becomes its own program. And then over to the left is one of the nicest spaces in the entire house. It's got large windows on every single side. This has a view out towards the existing park. You can actually see portions and pieces of the tennis courts and activities in the park. This view is out towards the front of the house. This just really as is a lovely space, and it could be a spot for a table setting. If you have a smaller group, it's just very cozy. So my whole, and this I shouldn't say mine, but the team in general, to try to keep it simple. We don't need to overthink this. Try to keep it simple. Try not to do many heroics to the structure in general, and yet keep it residential in feel, yet have it open to the community. So whether it's a birthday party or a small family reunion or maybe a company picnic, there's a whole different set of venues that could use it. So then we kind of, as we zoom in here, the rear, I've a double door shown here that kind of exits out to a larger scheme of something very similar. So this is a radius, and if you go to the site, there is a swale that runs through this site right about here. So basically a low point where water does on occasion flow. So there's a limit right here that kind of stops you, and then there's a limit on this side with the property line. So we've got a couple parameters right off the bat. So we know that we need to keep this guy pulled over to the left side of the screen. So this is currently shown as a radial plan, and if you could imagine, and I'm going to bring up some 3D views next, but you can imagine some wooden beams spanning this table setting that has a trellis on top, and then it comes out here to a stage area or an area where one could make an announcement, or maybe you have a small trio that plays some music, or that has some relationship to the house. You can also see right here there's an elevation change. I mean, when you go to the site, you'll notice that the house does sit up on a knoll in some respects, so we will need an ADA ramp that gets one up towards these rear doors so that will be ADA accessible. And we'll also have a kind of a plinth right here, or a piece that you step down from. So that gives you another opportunity if you wanted to have a spot on the exterior to potentially stage a spot for beverages or some food, kind of a central node for this party. So plans are sometimes a little bit deceiving. So let's, I'm going to switch here to a 3D view. So this is the house modeled, and the only thing that's missing from this model, which is relatively important, is the ground plane. So I'm still working on that component. So it's not actually floating in the air, but you'll have to bear with me a little bit. So let me do a couple things. So I can bring this guy down and turn off a few of the trees. And I think a lot of the topic here is probably going to revolve around the rear of the house. So this is kind of that idea of a radial pattern in the back that has some framing above. And then I have a 3D screenshot of that. So it's coming up here.
I like that.
Ben, is that going to be asphalt roofing or what?
So no, this could be many things, but it's currently shown as more like a trellis.
Okay.
So let's see here. Let's do another one here from the stage. So this view here is kind of from the stage, looking back towards the house.
We got people there already.
There's some people. There's actually people there.
You get the rent?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, right.
And I'll spin this around again in a second. Let's take I've got a shot here of the front entry. So as you come in the house, we talked about having that front vestibule, and then once you get past the vestibule, I currently have shown some more residential furniture on the left, kind of focusing around the existing fireplace. And then, kind of a feature wall here. This is kind of the main structural wall that splits the house in half. And so you can see where that kitchen really could become kind of a serving station of sorts. So you can walk all the way around that. So this is a view right as you come in the front door. And imagine the table is put up and down for different events. It's a flexible space. Let me show you another one here. And this is a view from that the room that has the windows on all three sides. So this is looking back towards that same center core. So once again, that fireplace is kind of this blue vertical piece in the center.
It looks tighter there than it actually is.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, that's
It's pretty decent size.
It's a good sized room. Yeah, you're right, Jeff.
Let's
Really
see.
accommodate. Even to a couple of square tables in there.
And then this is the that kind of mudroom in the rear, just like as if she's looking out towards the patio in the back. And then this is when you'd come, if you were at an event, you'd be outside and you come in the door and head towards that countertop straight ahead. So those are the 3D views that I have. So now I'm kind of free to zoom around a little bit. So if y'all have questions at this point, I can either cut some cross sections or get us a little closer in depth. And it might be that maybe I'm jumping around too much, or this might help a little bit. And my thought on this is, these, we could decide to do, some of these as with the trellis, and some just purely open. I mean, they help to define the space. And I could see these vertical posts as being, I've got an image here. There's a structure over in Devou Park that I think is pretty interesting. Yeah, here it is. That's the sort of feel that I kind of, that feels kind of what that natural look, and I like the idea of the stone because there's already retaining walls there that are done with natural stone. There'd be an opportunity to repeat that in the kind of fireplace area. We could also repeat that deal with the gazebo. And all this is doing is kind of leading these ideas up to, we're going to have another meeting with regards to the entire park, and Mrs. Lubers and the committee will you know, we'll be talking about the gazebo, and so at least we've gotten this up to that same speed where we can talk intelligently.
Well, I think you're gonna need that because you're gonna have sunlight reflection, you know, and you don't want hot, direct sun coming down on those tables either.
Yeah, and one of the good things that I can do with the software is we can set the coordinates and get the sun exactly where it's supposed to be, and see where, you know, because it is a western
Yes.
side. That's
Yes, it
not
is.
a perfect side for this type of venue, so we certainly will need, and there's a lot of trees, so that helps.
Mhm.
But we'll certainly need some man-made sun shading as well. So kind of as you look at this sort of scheme, the goal here was to be able to get about 100 people to be able to sit at tables, just from a ballpark number. So then just to see it in a larger context, let's see. Is that on here? Maybe not.
It's getting smaller,
It
yeah.
just gets smaller. There you go, just a little more. So I have the site modeled, the site with the topography. So my next step is to plug this into that so that we can, I mean, we should theoretically be able to drive down the driveway and kind of get a feel for it, which, that's part of the fun, but. So that's kind of the summary.
Well, I, for one, think you've done an outstanding job.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
that's
That is
great.
really nice.
I never
That's-
dreamed you could do that much with that house.
It's not even a car.
Yeah.
So many possibilities, it's just, I mean, it's awesome.
It does. And I like the idea of how can this relate to other built items, whether it's the, you know, what, gazebo,
Gazebo, yeah.
or a little, you know, restroom pocket or whatever else. That we at least would have a datum that we could start, you know, pushing that
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we'll send 50 people over to the gazebo.
Yeah, there you go. Could do that.
That has a roof on it.
Yeah.
Sit there for a while.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's
Great job.
very nice.